The swim course for the 2023 Ironman Florida is as followed. It features crystal clear water. Athletes will begin their journey in the Gulf of Mexico for this two-loop swim around Russell Fields Pier. You'll have a short beach run between your two laps. There are strong currents, riptides, occasional marine life that are possible to see. A universal flag system is used locally. The swim course in a clockwise direction and water temperatures typically in the low 70s, making it wetsuit legal. Once it's complete, athletes will run up the beach under a freshwater shower before entering transition. Wendy, you have done this course. How challenging is it to go from the beach into an ocean water swim, specifically there in the Gulf of Mexico?
I wouldn't say there's any challenge in going from a beach to the swim. It's shallow. So as you run from the sand into the water, you're still going to be running, and you're either going to fall and start swimming like I usually do. I usually start swimming pretty quickly. And athletes who aren't trying as much as I am for speed wise, they might just kind of walk out and wait till the water gets over their shoulders before they start swimming. And I would say they're less experienced swimmers, so they're just avoiding it as long as possible. The biggest thing about swimming in the Gulf is the riptides. The year I did the race was in 2021, and there was 500 athletes that did not finish the swim. None of them drowned. They were all okay. They just completed the first loop, and they realized there was no way they were going to make the cutoff, which was 2 hours and 20 minutes, or maybe some of them got pulled because they panicked, because it was a really, really tough swim for, again, the less experienced athlete. And so that's a concern that you all should have. I mean, that particular year we had a big cold front move in, and the day before the race was extreme high winds. If those winds were race day, I would not have done the race, and lots of rain. And it was like low 40s, maybe high 30s for a temperature high the day before. So we're talking Florida. That was kind of an extreme case. The weather's not always like that, but that's something you always want to take note of, because a lot of people think Ironman Florida, due to the nature of being a flat bike and flat run course, that it's going to be an easier course. And that year it definitely wasn't, because of the weather. The weather, I think, limits every easier type of course to make it a challenge. And for that year was definitely the swim.
Now, how challenging or intimidating is it for some of the first timers who are doing this course when you deal with currents? I know the buoys are out there. They're going to be on your right. But how far out do you go before you can't see the bottom? And how challenging is that for someone who goes, I've never swam in an ocean before. I've always been lake swims or maybe a downriver swim itself, but never in the ocean.
Yeah, I think when you're swimming in the ocean, because of the nature of the current, your stroke may change. So something to do in training is thinking about developing a little bit shorter, choppier stroke, so you can manage the current depending on how big it's going to be, how big the waves are going to be, as well as sighting. Sighting becomes a little bit more important, because you could sight into, the wave and not see the buoy because of the wave. And so sighting becomes a little bit more important, as well as being strong. This particular race, because it was in the ocean, I focused a little bit more on strength training during the later phases, during the buildup of this race, which heavier strength training more than I normally would do, because I knew strength would be a strength of mine to feel like a strong athlete, so I could battle the elements of any riptide or any waves in my way. And I think a lot of athletes get intimidated because it's not clear, like a clear ocean swim that I've swum in Kona. It's nice, but there are jellyfish. I didn't notice the jellyfish at all. I didn't get stung by any, but I hear stories that people get stung by jellyfish. Sometimes when someone sees a jellyfish or sees some sort of marine life and they never seen it before, it could kind of throw them back. Like they're like, whoa, what was that? And it could stop them in their tracks. But if you know that kind of stuff is going to be there, and you have the opportunity and training maybe to travel to Panama City and swim in the Gulf or somewhere in some other type of ocean leading up to the event, you're going to be more prepared for that marine life.
Clearly in Hawaii, salt water, same thing with the Gulf of Mexico. What about the clarity as you're out there?
To me, because of the weather, it was a cloudy day. And I think the water was a little bit darker than what I've seen because of the the rip tides and just, the nature of what
Stirs it
all that
up.
wind was stirring it up. Exactly. What it was bringing in. It wasn't that clear. What happened to us was, I was there a week and the water temperature was borderline going to be wetsuit legal. It was in that 75 to 76 degree range. And if it's above 76.1, if you want to be eligible for prizes, you can't wear a wetsuit. And so it was really borderline. And then overnight, because we had that cold front, I was still leaning towards not wearing a wetsuit until the race morning. And the race morning, the water temperature dropped 5 degrees overnight. So it ended up being high 60s. And luckily I had a wetsuit available for me to wear, and I'm glad I wore it because the air temperature was only like 45. And so there was some cold patches. It was fairly still warm. Like 69 was warm in a wetsuit, but then I hit some very, very cold patches because it was stirring. The waves and the current and the wind was stirring the water. So it was just an unusual swim. It wasn't something I expected when I signed up for Florida, but it is what it was. And with my experience, I was able to adapt and I had what I needed to overcome the riptide, and I had a wetsuit, so I was warm.
The two loop course is not exclusive to Florida, but it's not every race where you get out and go on the beach and then get back into the ocean. Tips, strategies, tactics for first timers or people who are back at this race who have done it for a while. How do you get out and get back in again? And what do you do when you're out?
Yeah. So when I was running, you're running on the sand. That's going to slow you down. I wasn't in any hurry. Like that's not some place where I was trying to make up time because I am a swimmer. So I kind of just conserved my energy and I just jogged that little bit of stretch on the sand. And then again, as soon as I really touched the water, I just dove in and started swimming again because I didn't want to have to run any further than I needed to because I wanted to swim further. And so a lot of athletes will walk that section. There's a lot of spectators. There's a lot of people there. There's help. There's assistance because, again, running on the sand, you might trip and fall on something. So there's plenty of volunteers kind of directing you where to go and help you overcome if you happen to struggle the first loop and you need a little bit of a break. That's where you can take a little bit of a break, meaning you need to rest and sit down if you know you're still going to make the 220 cutoff.
And there's that time to take a deep breath, and you're going from horizontal to vertical for 30 seconds or whatever, and then you're going back into the water. For those first timers, maybe assess, take a breath, and reset and go back in.
Right. You may feel a little dizzy. That's normal when you're going from vertical to horizontal. No, when you're going horizontal to vertical, you may feel a little lightheaded at first. That's when you really just need to slow yourself down. You don't want to dive back into the water if you're feeling dizzy.
And before we get to the bike course preview, there's a bit of a transition from the end of the swim up a little bit of a bank and then through some buildings still out into a parking lot for the bike transition.
Yeah, it's a very long transition. It is probably one of the longer transitions I've ever done. I don't remember the distance, but it is a long transition. And I wore my wetsuit all the way up to transition. Normally while I'm running, I'll peel down my wetsuit to my waist until I get in transition and then I'll pull it off. Or there's wetsuit strippers that will help you take your wetsuit off at the end of the swim. Because it was so cold, the air temperature was very cold, I chose to keep my wetsuit on. And then I went into the changing tent and I did a complete change. I took my swimsuit off and I put my dry kit on before I got on the bike.
And from when I covered the race as a reporter, they had freshwater showers to rinse off before you got to transition.
Right.